People are changing. They want the digital experiences that they love.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be connected for today's conversation with short, impactful discussions with CX leaders and innovators on how to prepare for tomorrow's consumer based on what we know today. Today, I'm joined by Brian Solis, world renowned digital anthropologist, futurist, 8-time best-selling author, and global keynote speaker, actually noted as one of the most creative and brilliant business minds of our time by Forbes. So it's my absolute pleasure to be joined by Brian to tackle today's topic: how customer habits and mindset impact customer experience. Brian, thanks for joining.
Well, hello, everybody. What a pleasure it is to be here today.
Yeah. I hope I did my part on flattering you a little bit for the introduction. But,
It's always hard to hear that,
yeah,
but I do appreciate it, and I guess it does come with many years of pushing a boulder of innovation up a hill.
yeah, that's a great way of putting it. So, Brian, tell me about your last 13-ish months. How have you been learning, staying engaged with new ideas? What have you been up to?
Well, about 13 months ago, I started as the Global Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce, and it
Great.
was a real interesting time to start a new chapter in my life for sure, but it was
Mm,
also one of the most creative opportunities to accelerate a lot of the research that I had been doing since about 2000. Well, technically since the late 90s, but really since the dawn of the smartphone, social media, the app economy, and really watching the acceleration of consumerization evolve because of its relationship with or the effects of digital.
mm,
And at Salesforce, I looked at how was the pandemic accelerating digital adoption, and therefore how was that adoption accelerating the change that we were seeing for 20 years, but just radically accelerated in that 1 year. And it
mm,
turned out to be some of the most inspirational, but also some of the most interesting research that I had done. One, the theory was, or the hypothesis was, that we knew digital was going to change consumerism, how people make decisions, how people shop, how people stay connected with one another, how people find and discover what it is that they want to purchase. What I didn't factor in was the extent of which COVID was going to alter things like values,
mm.
beliefs, spending, saving, uh, how important things like trust would become, how important things like playing an important role in society would become to brand. And
Right.
so, I guess said another way, in 1 year, the past 13 months, I have learned quite a bit about customer behaviors, expectations, experiences, and now I'm taking all of those insights and helping businesses transform to be more meaningful, to deliver better customer experiences, and ultimately to create new operational models to essentially cater to this customer who's not going to go backwards. They're only going to
Mm.
continue to evolve.
Right. And so we're talking a lot about this customer, but what has, just because I want to put you in the shoes of a customer also, what have you learned about yourself in this past 13, 14-month stretch as a consumer?
As a consumer, basically, the parallels were pretty dramatic. There was
Mm,
we didn't just have a pandemic, especially in the United States. We had an incredible what's the nicest way to put this? Let's just say politics. We're we're part of a lot of this stuff, and
mm,
what I learned about myself was to zoom in on the information that was important to me, but also to accelerate the things that I had long delayed. What I found as a consumer was that I needed to do more of the outdoor things, for example, that I said I was going to do. So we camped out in Lake Tahoe during the pandemic, and I started picking up outdoor sports. For example, yesterday I went skiing, snowboarding for the
mm.
first time in a long time, and I had to because it was the last day. But when you start looking at the world through a redefined set of values. So, for example, what is important? Who is important? You start making decisions accordingly. And so, what I learned about myself was that I accelerated the things that I had put to the wayside, and started living a different life. And when you start living a different life that way, you start shopping differently. You start looking for brands differently, and
Right.
it sort of parallels with some research McKinsey published that showed that in the United States, the numbers are up all over the world, but 75% of people in the United States experimented with a new brand, and most will stick with that new brand post pandemic.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's a stat that I found jaw dropping, and I've mentioned in the past. So I was worried I was saying it too often at this point. But it's certainly mind blowing, right? So we
Yes,
need to capture that consumer in this opportunity because it is a big opportunity.
it's an opportunity. Well, there's a sense of urgency, right? Because loyalty, retention are critical, but
Mm,
it is an opportunity because acquisition is also on the table as well. And so, the
right.
more that you can be relevant, the more that you can be engaging, the more that you know your customers, and the better you can serve them, right? Because one of the other interesting things that we learned, we published it in the well, it's basically in every single one of our reports. One is the state of connected customer, and the other one is the state of service. Is that customers want an integrated experience? They want companies to know them throughout marketing, sales, and service. They feel like companies don't know them across those boards. And it's not
Mm,
anything we haven't known for a long time, but it hasn't. That stat from McKinsey really says if you don't do this, then you're going to lose your customers are going to experiment. And who
right.
can afford that?
Absolutely. Well, Brian, let's get to the topic for today. So, how customer habits and mindset impact customer experience. And maybe before we actually dive in, let's set the stage with your opinion on what makes a good digital experience.
Oh gosh. Well, so how much time do we
Loaded
have?
question.
Like 3 hours?
Yeah, loaded question. Right?
What makes a good digital experience? I think it breaks down. I wrote a book a few years ago. It's called X: The Experience When Business Meets Design, and I spent an entire journey trying to answer that question.
Mm,
And also, I've spent years writing a series of research reports around digital transformation and customer experience. And the most interesting thing about those exercises was the research found that companies were invested in digital transformation. They were invested in digital. They were trying to modernize infrastructure operations, and the best ones were trying to digitize customer experiences to be. I think they thought that they were trying to deliver excellent digital experiences, but what they were delivering were digital touch points, uh,
mm,
facilitating digital transactions. And I make that point because the book went to say when you have someone's attention, whether it's in the real world or whether it's on this device, whether it's on a browser, whatever it is, when you have someone's attention, what makes a great experience?
right.
That way we can understand how to then digitize that or analog, deliver it via analog or via hybrid, because it's a question that we're not asking enough. And so the word experience simply means an emotional reaction to a moment, right?
Mm,
It could be measured by how you feel afterwards and also how you recall or retell that experience later. And that is what we leave to chance. We don't try to design for how you're going to feel in that moment. We try to get you to transact. So the answer to the question is really about who is on the other side of the screen,
right.
and how do they value things in their life that they love. And there's a lot to learn. For example, in the book, I explored the art of Disney parks and why they're so special,
Mm,
the art of storyboarding in a Disney movie, and how you could reverse engineer those types of insights to deliver great experiences. But I also looked at some of the best digital experiences in the game, whether they were literally games, or your favorite apps or services, to understand how we as individuals change when we have great experiences. So
mm,
if you have a fantastic digital experience, You're going to look at everything over time as substandard to that, regardless of the industry it's in.
Right.
So we have to then look at how do we design for those people uh, in the capacities of which we engage people, and it's a fascinating exercise if you allow yourself and your organization to move in that direction rather than to try to stuff the customer experiences you deliver within the confines that you have today. So
Mm.
this is why, for example, that McKinsey stat is so profound. It's that people are realizing that they have choices and they are finding the choices that are in their best interest.
Right.
And if companies aren't going to design for that, then we're seeing what happens.
Right, and you mentioned Disney and some of the magic. We had Dennis Snow on a few weeks back to talk about that because yeah, it is very profound. The Disney experience is certainly memorable, right? They certainly get people to come back.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
on a note for that, Brian, of course, we saw businesses forced to make a digital shift almost instantly. It felt like overnight for some of them. I remember Dick's Sporting Goods was applauded for, I think, day two into the COVID transformation. They placed a sticky note on their door for buy online, pick up at curbside. But do you think most have adapted at this point, or are there still some brands who are kind of respond or even reluctant, even at this stage right now?
When you introduced me, one of the things that I have had to become, didn't intend on becoming, was a digital anthropologist, which is to study how digital affects things
Mm,
like culture, norms, behaviors, beliefs, and how those play out in routines, and then sort of organize them by interests, aspirations, because when you become a digital customer, you change. We
mm,
kind of explored this a few minutes ago, but you really change. Like you're more impatient and demanding. You expect things to be more personalized. You want things to feel integrated and intuitive because you don't. Everything else is that way.
right.
Swipe, pinch, zoom, whatever, tap, speak. Uh, then your favorite services, like let's just say Netflix, for example, which is seamless and really starts to know you and show you movies that are for you, which is why I sent this I sent this tweet out the other day that said, when you're dating, you say, what's mine is yours, honey, and when you're married, don't touch my Netflix profile.
Yeah, right.
Because
Yeah.
because you want that personalized experience. And so these attributes of a digital customer are what businesses aren't necessarily embracing yet. They're still trying to digitize.
Mm,
They're digitizing transactions. They're digitizing touch points. But the word touch, uh, just like the word experience, is very human. Right? So again, when you have someone's attention, that's a gift, especially now. What's
mm,
that touch? And that's what we're designing for. We're designing for the experience to be enlivened by the touch, which means that we have to understand, for example, with BOPIS or curbside or uh, you know, click and collect, retailers were accelerating the delivery of that as a service, but they didn't stop to say, well, what is good in
mm.
terms of that? Because I could tell you that in the research I did, and this was before COVID, again, once you taste the digital experience, it is the standard, and you start to become what I call an accidental narcissist. So, for example, people who were prolific users of BOPIS, uh,
Mm,
over time, they want to be out of their car and in their car, or receive the product before they leave within 2 minutes. It's an incredibly high bar to try to meet, but also they want dedicated. If they have to come into the store, they want dedicated channels for them. They don't want to walk up to a traditional service counter and meet a traditional rep. They want somebody who is trained in meeting that person and understanding that digital experience, that they have to move quicker, that they want to feel appreciated, and it's crazy in terms of the training that's required there.
okay, so Brian, consumers, like you just kind of noted, they were very quick to expect the curbside pickup, and I don't know if we've mentioned convenience lately, but that was obviously a big keyword throughout the pandemic. So I'm getting consumers typically adapt a bit faster than businesses, and they obviously create some pretty high standards. And I'm sure you know the stat, the customer experience gap. 80% of CEOs believe they're giving a superior experience, yet only 8% of their customers believe they are. I'm making a little bit of that my own version, so to say. But what can you say about this customer experience gap, and where do you recommend businesses really start when they're trying to bridge this gap?
That is a really important place to start. It's a great question, but let's go back to your stat. That divide, I call it the experience divide. That experience divide exists because CEOs don't live the brand or the business the way that their customers do. In
Right.
fact, one of the you'll I don't know if you've seen the same thing, but one of the things that always surprises me, it shouldn't after all these years, but it still does, is when you ask an executive when's the last time they shopped in their store, or when's the last
Mm,
time they visited their own website, or when's the last time they tried to book a meeting with somebody, and you realize that the answer is like, I don't know, I haven't. It's been a long time,
right.
and that's why you get such an incredible divide. And if you break down that word again, experience, which is that emotional reaction, if you're used to moving at this speed and then you have to move at a different speed and to go through all of these different processes that don't align with how your culturally relevant apps and services are delivering to you, then it feels off. And
Mm,
it feels off to a point until you feel like, why do I keep doing this? Like anything in life, you're going to push whatever is friction, whatever's filled with friction, eventually out of your life. You'll live with it for a while because that's just what we do as human beings until you don't have to. And then once you don't have to, there's no way you're going back to that. So that's why it's so
yeah.
critical to understand how to close that experience divide, especially now that when we talk about consumer behavior accelerating change during the pandemic, when we talk about things like digital accelerating, years of digital transformation accelerating in the last year, what we're really saying is people are changing. They want the digital experiences that they love. It's actually accelerating the divide, right? Just itself is not closing the divide.
Mm,
Experiences is what closes the divide. And if you're not intentionally trying to close that divide, it's getting bigger.
right.
And right there in the middle of that divide is called disruption for you, and an opportunity for somebody else to say that is not being met. And this is why we saw, for example, the last 10 years, incredible rise in D2C brands because they were looking right at that experience divide and saying, well, the mattress industry, the luggage industry, the eyeglass industry, the shoe industry is not trying to solve for that digital first customer. So
Mm,
look at that. Let's create entirely new companies and zoom in on that divide. And that divide has been in the making for 20 years, going back to the consumerization of the internet, Amazon in what was it, 1996. This
mm,
has been a long time coming, and when we talk about it in those terms, it's almost a bit ridiculous that we haven't tried to solve for this sooner. And that's, I guess, to the point that I really want to make is that digital customers uh, aren't just millennials or centennials. They're people who just prefer things faster, more conveniently, more efficiently, more personally. And that's why this year at Salesforce, I published some research called Generation N, where the N stands for novel, like the
mm,
novel coronavirus. They said that customers that had to become digital first because of shelter in place or because of fear of just getting sick, whether you're 25 or you're 45 or you're 55, you start to act the same way. You have the same expectations. You want to go through the journey the same way. So it's not a demographic. It's a psychographic. It's a group, now a massive group of customers who
mm,
want things their way. And this is the foundation for what we call a customer 360 business, where you build the touch points around them, where their identity is actually carried through like a baton in a relay race, rather than having to sort of start and finish with different departments as their own little business units. And if one of the things that we were talking about earlier, just as an example, I call today's consumer, once you become digital first, an accidental narcissist, and I say that lovingly, of course, because
Yes.
once you get a great experience, it's the standard, right? And we were talking earlier about buy online, pick up in store, or curbside, or click and collect. And one of the things that I had found in research was, and this was before the pandemic, was people who use those services a lot have a different set of expectations, a different set of behaviors, a different set of mindsets. For example, when they pull into that space, well, first they want a dedicated space. They want dedicated signage, so it's very clear for them because they're moving at a million miles an hour. Because we know how we are when we're on these devices. Right?
Yeah.
We reprogram our brains to move at the speed of our devices, and they want to they want their merchandise or their item or their food within 2 minutes so that they could be gone again. If they do have to come into the store, they want dedicated signage. They want a dedicated counter. They want dedicated representatives who are trained specifically to deal with a digital first customer. So, for example,
Right.
I did I had a BOPUS experience where there was no parking, that I had to walk in and figure it out. Uh, the digital experience was mixed in with the traditional service desk that had a line around the corner,
Mhm.
and then the first question, should be, "Hello, Brian. You're here for your appointment. I've got a whole window of people that I'm expecting. You ordered this. It's fantastic. Thank you for serving us." Like that. You have this script for the digital first customer rather
Right.
than "How can I help you?" And so you really start to then reimagine, if this is the case for digital customers, how can I reimagine every touch point, analog and digital and hybrid,
Right.
to meet their needs? And that means that you have to. I'm a digital anthropologist for this very reason, to study how digital transforms people so that you can then understand not just the data from them, but also how to deliver exceptional experiences that they're going to love. And look, the ROI on this is, because a lot of things have been a cost center, right? Service has been a cost center. Uh, but when it comes to customer experiences, it's theirs. I added an apostrophe s to this: the customer's experience, not customer experience. The customer's experience is what we're designing for. It's theirs, and they now are empowered. What they feel is what they recall, and what they recall forms the foundation of a review that
Mm.
you might read on Amazon. Jeff Bezos once said, "Your brand is what people say when you're not in the room." So design for that. What do you want people to feel, and what do you want people to say? And don't design for your digital expectations. You have to design for their digital expectations. And it's different. And it's also a wonderful opportunity for a renaissance in CX. Design it from the outside in, design it as if you were Uber, design it as if you were Fortnite, design it as if you were Tinder. And I know
Mm.
that all sounds weird, but those are the best in class experiences online.
Right.
And so learn from those, learn from people, and use digital to deliver a smile in a new way.
Right, because this digital first consumer, it does seem like a tremendous opportunity for personalization, right? And you touched on C360 a bit and getting to know your customers throughout the journey. But it does feel like, yeah, this is a great opportunity. Our customers are sharing their voice in more places than ever digitally. A great opportunity to listen and improve that personalization.
That's absolutely right. In fact, personalization is something that we've talked about for a long time, but it's really now I don't know any other way to put this. When we talk about the ROI in terms of, what's the return on investment, I also talk about it. What's the return on ignorance? What's the cost of us not doing this?
Right.
And when it comes to personalization, you now have access to real time data. You have access to automation. We have access to, you know, capable artificial intelligence to help us understand and make sense of patterns, to deliver the right experience in the right context, the right device, the right time.
Mm.
So we're there now. It's a matter of intention. We have to want to be able to do this, and not just once, but throughout that journey.
So, Brian, how do psychological changes play a role in customer experience? The fear, the anxiety, confusion that we felt, of course, in the height of this pandemic, does that change the way we do business moving forward? Or
Well, it changes everything. This is part of the research I did around Generation Novel,
Mm.
which showed that you had an accelerated digital first mentality, and with that, all of the digital first expectations that come with that. Then you also had the somatic marker that is COVID-19, which is a deep, visceral, emotional bookmark that is, on one side, will forever change the way you see an empty roll of toilet paper,
Mm.
or a bottle of sanitizer. But really, deep down, what's happening is it's getting you to question the things that matter most to you as a human being. So, who matters? What matters? This also subconsciously or consciously affects your values and your beliefs, how you spend money, how you save money, but ultimately, what you value and how that aligns with the value that others offer. So, for example, in our State of the Connected Customer research at Salesforce, we found that trust had become one of the top things that customers expected from brands to have to earn, businesses have
Mm.
to earn from moving forward, which means that they were hyper aware to things like, for example, how did they act or respond during the pandemic? In fact, 31% of customers reported trusting companies less within the last year already, based on how they responded during the pandemic. Uh, Another report that we published showed that 61% of customers were reevaluating their relationship with businesses based on the values of the business itself. So these human dynamics now start to come into play because customers have, because of this somatic marker, because this control alt delete moment, have really started to question everything. They become conscious, not in like this medical, metaphysical, or spiritual kind of way, but they're aware now of things that matter to them because this moment has sort of placed upon them great stress, but also great time for reflection. And this is going to last. This isn't going to be something that, okay, everybody, pandemic's over. We're going to
Right.
be with this pandemic for a long time, especially especially since we can't get our act together on whether or not we want to help ourselves with a vaccine. So that means that this, the more it lasts, the more it changes us. So for any company paying attention to how to deliver better customer experiences, better customer engagement, even better employee experiences and engagement, is to understand the human side of this disruption as well. Because things like wellness, care, listening, like really listening, uh, engagement, these are all factors that become competitive advantages now because they require a level of empathy that just hasn't been part of traditional business models.
So empathy is a good word here because my next question for you is, when you're thinking from the top down, what steps can executives take to ensure focuses on creativity, empathy, inclusion, adaptability, collaboration? All of these are being valued and actually sharpened. And then obviously, why is that important?
It's really interesting that you read that list off because those are all the top things
Mm.
that have been deemed by, we have a future of work report that we just published. The World Economic Forum publishes the most in demand skills over the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm.
Those are all listed on both of those lists: creativity, empathy, things like also critical thinking. uh, they're all what would have been defined as soft skills, but are now technically they're hard skills, right? Because humanity hasn't necessarily had a role in most business environments. Very structured, very hierarchical, very linear. But now, in order to be innovative, in order to be adaptive, in order to understand how to be uh, meaningful to customers and to employees, all of those soft skills are now the things that are going to accelerate business transformation, which is fantastic. But
Right.
also, if you think about it, those aren't the things that we learned in university or at school. These are
Right.
things that we're having to learn now, the things that executives need to understand is that there's a reason for this, right? These are all the things that allow for a business to be more human, but also more innovative. And the word dynamic, agile. I mean, this isn't the last disruption, and we're not done evolving.
Right.
So we have to now create a more adaptive uh, business model to stay current or stay ahead of customers as they continue to evolve. And look, the last thing I'll say is this: pandemic, right? Climate change. These are all real things. These are all going to have impacts. This is not our last pandemic, but also every digital wave. If in hindsight, Amazon in the 90s, you know, the iPhone mid 2000s, social media, the app economy, the on demand economy, the like Uber and Airbnb, things like Fortnite. Those all had a profound influence on how customers behave, right?
Hmm.
And the pandemic accelerated that. But on the horizon, and right now, we have 5G, AI, like true artificial intelligence. We have Internet of Things, the industrial Internet of Things. We have machine learning. We have quantum computing, 10 years out. There's 30 different simultaneous technology disruptions on the horizon, and every single one of them is going to influence how customers behave. So to have an adaptive organization is critical, because you're going to have to respond to these changes in real time, over time.
Right. Brian, I've kept you long enough. Thank you so much for the time. It was an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate your time and walking us through how customer habits and mindset impact CX. It was a pleasure. Enjoy life out on the West Coast.
Hey, Terrence, thank you so much. And for everybody else, uh, kind of follow it along here. The one bit that I'll leave for you is this, is that customers aren't just aware, they are paying attention to how they're being served, and they are
Mm.
getting excellent experiences in their life. And if you're not on par with that, even if it's not in your industry, if you're not on par with those experiences, they're going to experiment with choice. And it's the hardest part about this is to start to talk to, and we've talked about this for years, silos this, silos that, politics, egos. Customer doesn't care about how you're structured. They
Yeah.
don't even know. uh, all they know is what they want and how they want it and when they want it. And so the faster you could form a subcommittee, a steering committee, whatever it is, where you start to talk to other people responsible for the customer journey, sales, marketing, service, for example, start collaborating on ways to start sharing data and to passing that baton, even in the smallest of ways, maybe a mobile only experience. Part of the shopping, find your weakest points and just start to
Mm.
collaborate on a solution, because you have to start somewhere and you have to start.
Start now. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Brian Solis, a global innovation evangelist at Salesforce, 8-time best-selling author, world-renowned keynote speaker. An absolute pleasure. Thank you for the time. Next week, we have Ajit Shivadasan, global head of online sales at Lenovo. He's going to walk us through crafting a seamless customer experience and obviously share some insights from Lenovo. Thank you all for joining, and thank you again, Brian, for the time.